Hey folks, it's Sean Robinson from British Columbia, Canada. I am so excited to be able to share with you on this MAD day with MAD PD. I'm going to be talking about connections-based learning. I've been spending the last few years connecting my classes with experts, with organizations, with the community and classrooms around the world. And I'd like to share not just the connections that we've done, but really the pedagogy around connection. And so I'll probably talk a little bit about some research. I'll talk about some best practices. So I'm hoping that you're going to be able to get something out of this. I've got the group chat ready to go. If people have questions, you can just send some over with the group chat. And I'm just going to share my screen here and show you just a couple of hashtags that you can use. So my name is Sean Robinson. My Twitter handle is SRTutor. And of course, we're going to use the MADPD hashtag, but also you can use the CBL chat hashtag. And that's the one that I use when I'm talking about connections-based learning. So this is my class here. We spend a lot of time making connections with people around the world. And so we're connecting here with Saul Mwame. We're talking about the global goals. We're talking about innovation. And so this is something that I've spent some time working on. And so I'd like to share with you a bit about that. So I'm going to ask a question. Now, I'm a science teacher. This could be for anything, but when you're considering uncovering a learning outcome with your students, and I'm thinking from a science perspective, but it could be anything. What are your first steps? Let's say you've accessed prior knowledge and now you're thinking, okay, how can I teach this? The students don't know anything about this. And so here's an example. If you consider V equals IR, which is Ohm's law, and you have to teach this to your students, you've accessed some prior knowledge, understanding that they don't really understand anything about it. And so what are your first steps? I just want you to think about that just for a second. Now, I've spent some time with different people. I was even talking with some superintendents recently. And, you know, the typical things were mentioned. So first of all, I have to understand what it's all about. You know, I have to educate myself. Also, we want to make it real for the students. We want to see how this plays out in the students' lives. But the one thing that I'm actually going to suggest to you, and this is really the first part of connections-based learning, is I want to suggest to you to make a connection. And that's the first thing that I did when I wanted to uncover Ohm's law with my students, is I made a cold call tweet. And I sent out to Eladio Mendez Made a question. I was considering light poverty, and I was thinking about, okay, well, how can I make Ohm's law real for my students? And what kind of connection can I make with that? And so he responded and shared with our class what was going on in the Dominican Republic. And he shared about the betes. He shared what his students had done on a recent trip to the sugarcane fields, where we have a lot of Haitian workers working to gather the sugarcane and the difficulties in those communities. He shared about the lack of access to electricity. And that was a big concern for my students because we heard about that maybe these communities might get 1 or 2 hours of electricity in a day, but those hours are during the day to help with any of the machines. And so you don't get the access to electricity at night. Kids are working in the fields in the day. The only time they could get any education is at night, and that wasn't happening. And so through this, I was able to ask this question to my students. Now that we know what we know, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to make about it? And that's the typical connections-based learning question. We've made a connection with a learning partner. And now what are we going to do about it? And then I throw it back to the students. and it allows for individualization, allows for them to gauge the speed of their learning, differentiation, different approaches to understand the concepts, and really personalization, allowing the students to change the direction, go in their own direction, really take control of the direction. And so I've created actually an approach that puts all of these things together. And I call it connections-based learning. And I consider it really a pedagogy. We're not just here to connect our students, but really we're about the learning and using the connection for learning. And I break it down into lenses because I don't want to add any more work to educators. Really, we're so busy with our report cards and phoning parents and gathering resources that we don't have a lot of time to add something. So the point that I wanted to make is that with connections-based learning, we're really not adding anything to your load. Really, it's a shift in vision. And I don't want to talk about all of these today. I just want to focus a little bit on the connections lens. And really, it's the changing of the question from how can we learn this to who can we engage as we learn. So what happened with that connection? Well, I found that students were raising money, students were doing some research and really testing some things out, looking for ways to get power without having to plug something in. So kinetic energy, solar energy, and then we made a fantastic connection out east, and we learned about engineering brightness. And so these students here were able to put together a solar-powered 3D printed lantern. And Ian Fogarty, he was a mentor for us, and it started a whole bunch of different Skype chats, different opportunities for the students to make other connections. In fact, I had a teacher that I was working with who said, hey, you know what, Robinson, I'm actually heading over to the Dominican Republic. And we were able to share these lanterns with them, and he was able to do some teaching with them. We spent time Skyping again and really celebrating what was going on between these two classes. And in fact, it was even many more classes because we had a whole other school that was working with us to raise money to be able to make these lanterns. All right, so that's really the story. And if you're interested in learning about the story, and one of the things I love about this connected world are student blogs. And so if you're interested in learning about what happened and the student perspective and really finding out the artifacts of learning, then you can definitely go to this website. This is Janas Blog, and she shares about the entire experience. So here in British Columbia, we have learning outcomes that really go beyond the content. We call them the curricular competencies. And so though my focus was V equals IR, I had all of these in the background to contribute, to care for the community and the world, to cooperatively design products, contributing to finding solutions to problems at the local and or global level. You know, and this is a big ask. So the new or redesigned BC curriculum is doing a big ask, and I can't imagine doing something like this without making a connection. So a connection allows for the contribution. If you don't have a connection, then really, how do you contribute? Who are you contributing to? And so I just want to share briefly about the connection lens. So when I look at possibilities for connection, I think about the community, connecting with experts, with organizations and classrooms around the world. And so, you know, there's me with my guitar, and we're sharing at a senior's home. We're doing some singing, you know, so making those connections into the community, looking around at both the school community and just around in your local community. What are the needs and how do those fit with your learning outcomes? Also making connections with experts. Here's a connection that we made with Karishma Bagani and her low-cost water purifier that she called the organization Matoni Dichuit. And so this was a great opportunity for our students to be able to respond. And once again, I turned to the students and I said, now that we know what we know, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to make about it? And it allows for some fantastic differentiation. Students were making social media campaigns. They were creating videos. And even I had some students who started to partner with Karishma and work on her website. You can connect with organizations. So with the learning outcomes of health that I had in one of my classes, my students brought in a student cancer survivor. And so what are we going to do about it? Well, hey, let's raise some money for cancer research. And of course, considering classroom partnerships. All right, and so here is our Dominican Republic connection. And once again, achieving those learning outcomes, achieving the V equals IR, and also the curricular competencies, but also making a difference. And that's, I think, what this MAD PD session is pretty much all about, is making a difference. And so here's one way of doing it. Look, what does the research say about this? Well, if you consider, I'm just going to share this one research article, actually the book by Bransford, Brown, and Cocking, and really they're asking you, they're saying that we must, through connections, allow students to have access to concrete data and working scientists. All right, to receive feedback from a variety of human sources. And so when I think about the feedback that Jana gets from the blog, from sharing out, from a variety of human sources, and I really encourage our learning partners to give feedback to the students as they share out their artifacts of learning. And then really connecting students with outsiders and building local and global communities. And so I think, I got to put this in. So I am a founding ambassador for the Teach SDGs movement. And so, if you're looking for really a to-do list, if you're looking for, well, what can my class get involved in? We have the 17 goals. And so really just taking a look at those goals, maybe accessing the Teach SDGs hashtag on Twitter would be a great starting point to be able to say, okay, what kind of connections should my students be making? Now, I'm coming to the end here. We're just in the final stretch. I just want to share that I do have a website called Connections-Based Learning, of course, and you can access that. And I include things like platforms. I include all sorts of ideas about the connection lens, also the collaboration lens and the cultivation lens. And so you can check that out. Now, some fantastic platforms for making connections. Of course, we have Lee Castle's Digital Human Library, a great way to connect with experts. And then also we brought in the Connected Learning Partnership. So there's so many educators from around the world that you can connect with there. Virtual Researchers on Call, Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. One that I'm very interested in now. It's more new to me, but Beluga. And with Beluga, you can not only find some great content, but you can make connections around the world. And then you can also have an impact right then and there. As your students get involved in the app, they build a profile. And as they build a profile, they're building resources to be able to send those resources to people in need. All right, and of course, we've got Skype in the classroom, 5 different ways to connect your students. So what has been the reception? The reception has been great. Really looking at the pedagogy, if you know Barbara Zielonka, Global Teacher Finalist. She's somebody who is very involved in connections-based learning. So from the very veteran teachers to Ms. Emily Wong, and she made her first connections-based learning activity for her students, and it was a home run. And so I am going to skip back and see if there's any questions. So let's head back to the chat. And I don't see any questions. I'm going to check out, see if I got anything on the Twitter. All right. Hey, folks, so great to spend these 15 minutes with you. Thanks, Peter and Derek, for this MAD event, creating MAD PD. It's been great. I've already got to check out some presentations this morning, and I was with Noah this morning watching, and I'm excited for more learning happening throughout the day. Thanks so much for watching, for checking this out, and keep connecting.